This is Radio Imanzi, broadcasting from Kigali. Here is the news in English, brought to you by Fiona Umuganwa. The headlines. President Paul Kagame addressed the Talking Africa-Europe debate on migration and mobility on Thursday, January 27th. The government of Rwanda has launched a new Kigali declaration to strengthen its commitment to ending neglected tropical diseases. The government of Rwanda has announced it will reopen its borders with Uganda as part of the efforts to restore the relationship between the two countries. Toyota company officials say that they are working with Japan's space agency on a vehicle to explore the lunar surface. President Alberto Fernandez said that Argentina has reached an agreement with the International Monetary Fund to refinance more than $40 billion in debt. Now the news in detail. President Paul Kagame addressed the Talking Africa-Europe debate on migration and mobility on Thursday, January 27th. He said that young Africans should leverage available technology to create jobs and integrate into the European labor market without necessarily migrating to other countries. There are several reasons why Africans migrate to Europe. Some of them are justified, others are not, but they are either political, economic, security, all wrapped up on matters of governance. Our starting point is that every young African should be able to lead a dignified, productive, and safe life on the African continent, whether in their home country or elsewhere in Africa. President said that both continents can benefit from migration provided that it is orderly, safe, and focused on the needs and aspirations of each person. President Paul Kagame speaking at the Talking Africa-Europe debate on migration and mobility.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Excellency Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Prime Minister of Greece, the Hellenic Republic. I'm very happy to meet you, sir, just even though virtually, happy to meet you. Mo Ibrahim and the co-founder of the Africa-Europe Foundation, distinguished participants. I'm very honored to join you today for this timely discussion about migration and mobility. Before I start my contribution, let me say I want to depart from kind of two positions. I know there are many here in the audience maybe who are like me. One, the experience of being a refugee or a migrant. Later on, also the responsibility of a leader in addressing some of these problems. So I have had these two experiences, therefore my viewpoints are based even on, personal sensitivities to this matter. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Africa-Europe Foundation for facilitating this discussion ahead of the upcoming African Union, European Union Summit. Migration and mobility have long been at the forefront of the dialogue between Africa and Europe. Several reasons as to the question raised by Mo Ibrahim, why Africans would migrate to Europe, say. Different reasons. Some of them justified, others not. But they are either political, economic, security, all that wrapped up on matters of governance. In fact, if Africans, first of all, would be comfortable staying at home in their own countries, and at the same time allowed to move from one country to another, then some of these problems would be reduced to the most minimum. But the terms of the debate are broken. Dangerous journeys continue to cause loss of life and empower criminal networks. We need new thinking and actually action to give us the results we want. To make progress, we must correctly diagnose the root cause of migration. The most important driver is the imbalance in human capital opportunities between our continents, that is between, say, Europe and Africa. Access to skills, training, healthcare, and decent work may be unavailable on the return on a person's capabilities may be limited due to poor governance. An effective and humane migration cooperation framework must be based on addressing the human capital investment gap. The migration challenge is a shared responsibility for Africa, Europe, and multilateral agencies. All countries have the right to control their borders and regulate immigration. Settling in another country by anyone is not an automatic entitlement. There needs to be a better mechanism in place to distinguish between irregular migrants from relatively stable countries and those deserving of special protection who may get lost in the crowd. Similarly, obtaining refugee status should not be the only way to attain legal residence in destination countries. We also need to be doing a better job of engaging stakeholders on all sides of the migration question, particularly the civil society and advocacy groups which shape the political debate. Overall, our starting point is that every young African should be able to lead a dignified, productive, and safe life on the African continent, whether in their home country or elsewhere in Africa. The recent African Union instruments expand the scope of mobility within Africa, particularly the African Continental Free Trade Area and the Protocol on the Free Movement of Persons. Here I want to say, of the 55 countries on our continent, so few have signed this protocol to allow freedom of movement by the Africans. Wide access to digital skills and technologies is one of the most strategic ways to modernize the migration policy debate. It is no longer necessary to relocate to Europe in order to participate directly in the European labor market, for example, by supplying outsourced services to European clients. Young Africans can do so from Africa with public-private technology investments that create jobs. multi-year partnerships between Africa and Europe can help address the migration challenge both in humanitarian terms and more broadly. One example is the emergency transit mechanism established in Rwanda in 2018. In fact, the discussion started and the offer started in 2018 in partnership with the African Union and UNHCR to receive vulnerable migrants needing evacuation from Libya. Partners in Europe have supported this initiative as well. More than 650 migrants have been welcomed and protected at this facility while awaiting resettlement processing. More comprehensive forms of migration cooperation are also under discussion with some other countries. However, policies focused on detention, deportation, and deterrence have not been effective and will not provide a lasting solution. Therefore, we have to be thinking and acting differently. Migration in both directions will continue to be a defining feature of relationship between Africa and Europe for decades to come. It can be mutually beneficial, provided that it is orderly, safe, and focused on the needs and aspirations of each person. The best long-term approach is to work together to rectify the human capital gap that underlies the current crisis while reaffirming our obligation to provide protection and humanitarian assistance to those who need it. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, therefore, we can build on this, and as long as we work together and have honest and straightforward discussion, I think this problem is really not insurmountable, and I'm talking from experience. What we have already done, as I said earlier, rescuing these migrants from Libya. We had done another case with Israel. We are now discussing with other countries. And I think if we put our heads together, we shall find a solution. Thank you very much.
The government of Rwanda has launched a new Kigali declaration to strengthen its commitment to ending neglected tropical diseases. The Prime Minister of Rwanda, Dr. Edward Ngirente, on behalf of His Excellency Paul Kagame, virtually officiated the launch of the Kigali Declaration on Neglected Tropical Diseases. Ahead of the World Neglected Tropical Diseases Day, which is celebrated on 30th January, the government of Rwanda has launched a new Kigali Declaration to strengthen its commitment to ending neglected tropical diseases. The declaration was officially launched on Thursday, January 27th, during a virtual event. Minister Edward said that Rwanda commits to enhancing collaboration with different actors to respond to the neglected tropical diseases burden and to eliminate them as a public health problem by 2030. The use of mobile money has increased among Rwandans since its introduction in the country in 2010. But a question that always comes to mind is, in the unfortunate case where one user dies, how can the next of kin claim the money in the deceased person's account? According to MTN, you have to present a death certificate of the deceased, notarized documents proving that you are the rightful manager of the deceased's account. Fill out a set of customer forms and attach a copy of your ID. MTN says that as long as they have all the documents needed, it will just be a matter of transferring the money. The government of Rwanda has announced it will reopen its borders with Uganda as part of the efforts to restore the relationship between the two countries. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement on Thursday stating that Rwanda will reopen Gatuna border on Monday, January 31st, to allow easy movement between the two countries. The statement came following the visit of Lieutenant General Muhoozi Kainerugaba of Uganda on 22nd January. The government of Rwanda has taken note that there is a process to solve issues raised by Rwanda, as well as commitments made by the government of Uganda to address remaining obstacles. Now some items of international news. The main opposition leader in Zimbabwe, Nelson Chamisa, feels optimistic about winning the next year's presidential elections. He said that the change in leadership in Zambia had given him a lot of hope for Zimbabwe that has been ruled by the same party, ZANU-PF, for nearly 42 years. Chamisa lost the general elections in 2018 to Emerson Mnangagwa in what he denounced as a stolen vote. Burkina Faso's new leader, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba, gave his first speech last night on national television. The new leader has promised a return to the normal constitutional order when the conditions are right. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba led a mutiny that ousted President Roch Kabore on Monday. Burkina Faso is the third West African country to witness a military takeover in the past year. Guinea and Mali have both had sanctions imposed on them by ECOWAS to press them to return to a constitutional order. In his speech, Damiba said the fight against jihadists will be his priority, and he also promised to recapture rural areas, allowing the 1.5 million people who have fled their homes to return. Toyota company officials say that they are working with Japan's space agency on a vehicle to explore the lunar surface, with ambitions to help people live on the moon by 2040 and then go live on Mars. The vehicle being developed is called Lunar Cruiser. Japan's government said today it will watch the World Health Organization's investigation into staff complaints over racism and abuse by a top Japanese official at the agency. World Health Organization staffers have alleged that Dr. Takeshi Kasai, the UN Health Agency's top director in the Western Pacific, engaged in unethical, racist, and abusive behavior, undermining their efforts to curb the coronavirus pandemic, according to an internal complaint filed last October and emailed last week. Hong Kong is reducing foreign arrival quarantine from 21 to 14 days. Hong Kong is reducing the length of mandatory quarantine for people arriving from overseas from 21 to 14 days, even as the city battles a new surge in COVID-19 cases. Hong Kong is a major hub for business and finance, and the tight restrictions on foreign travel had drawn complaints, especially from the large expatriate community. Russia's top diplomat said today that Moscow will not start a war in Ukraine, but warned that it wouldn't allow the West to trample on its security interests amid fears that it is planning to invade its neighbor. U.S. President Joe Biden warned Ukraine's leader a day earlier that there is a distinct possibility that Russia could take military action against the former Soviet state in February. There won't be a war as far as it depends on the Russian Federation. We don't want a war, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in a live interview with Russian radio stations. President Alberto Fernandez said that Argentina has reached an agreement with the International Monetary Fund to refinance more than $40 billion in debt. He said that Argentina had an unpayable debt that left it without a present or a future, and now they have a reasonable agreement that will allow them to grow and comply. Since 2020, Argentina has been involved in vigorous negotiations with the IMF to refinance the debt taken in 2018 during a currency crisis. The review of Rwanda Stock Exchange on 28th January 2022. The trading session recorded a total turnover of 1,078,816,800 Rwandan francs worth of bonds traded in 3 deals on the fixed income market and 868,000 Rwandan francs from 18,400 shares traded in 2 deals on the equities market. As the share counters closed, I&M Bank closed the counter at 45 Rwandan francs. The trading session recorded a total turnover of 805,500 Rwandan francs from 17,900 shares traded in 1 deal. Bralirwa closed the counter at 125 Rwandan francs. The trading session recorded a total turnover of 62,500 Rwandan francs from 500 shares traded in 1 deal. Simerwa closed the counter at 120 Rwandan francs. MTN Rwanda at 180 Rwandan francs. Bank of Kigali at 245 Rwandan francs. Equity Bank at 440 Rwandan francs. Kenya Commercial Bank at 370 Rwandan francs. National Media Group at 1,200 Rwandan francs. Uturi Supermarket at 104 Rwandan francs. RH Buffalo at 526 Rwandan francs as the market closed. Currency market review of today, 28th January 2022. The Kenyan shilling buying price was 8.8 Rwandan francs and selling price was 8.9 Rwandan francs. Tanzanian shilling buying price was 0.43 and selling price was 0.44 Rwandan francs. Ugandan shilling buying price was 0.28 Rwandan francs and selling price was 0.29 Rwandan francs. Burundian franc buying price was 0.5 Rwandan francs and selling price was 0.51 Rwandan francs. The US dollar buying price was 1,002 Rwandan francs and the selling price was 1,022 Rwandan francs. The British pound buying price was 1,343 Rwandan francs and selling price was 1,370 Rwandan francs. The euro buying price was 1,117 Rwandan francs and selling price was 1,139 Rwandan francs. With that, we come to the end of tonight's edition.